A driver was humiliated and fired in front of his 6-year-old daughter. Upon seeing her father being humiliated, the little girl revealed a family secret that left everyone in a state of shock. The night fell upon the mansion as Victoria Morgan hurried down the second-floor hallway, her steps muffled by the luxurious red carpet. Her slim, well-groomed fingers clutched a file of documents tightly to her chest, as she nervously looked over her shoulder every few seconds. Sweat began to bead on her perfect, made-up forehead, and her thoughts echoed in her mind. I need to copy these documents before Robert returns from the meeting. I can't miss this opportunity to secure my future in the richly decorated office. Victoria turned on the antique lamp on the solid wood desk and began rummaging through the drawers with increasing urgency. Her hands trembled slightly as she rapidly flipped through the papers, searching for the documents she needed. The ticking of the wall clock seemed to grow louder, increasing. In the heart of a sprawling estate, where shadows danced across marble floors and whispers seemed to echo endlessly, Victoria stood frozen at the precipice of her own undoing. She had always believed herself cunning, a master manipulator who could bend fate to her will. But now, staring down at Robert's crumpled form, sprawled lifelessly at the foot of the grand staircase, she felt as though the universe had finally caught up with her. It all began earlier that day, when Robert's voice cut through the air like steel, low but sharp with resolve. "When my lawyers are done with you," he'd said, his words dripping venom, "there won't be anything left. You'll go back to where you came from, Victoria. No money, no status, nothing." The declaration hit her like a slap, shattering the illusion of control she'd so carefully cultivated. Her dreams of wealth and power, carefully constructed over years of calculated moves, began slipping through her fingers like grains of sand in an hourglass. Panic. Now, she was trapped in a nightmare, witnessing something no child should ever see. As Victoria paced the entrance hall, rehearsing her fabricated story, Emma held her breath, praying not to make a sound. Every step Victoria took echoed like a metronome, marking the passage of seconds that felt like hours. "He slipped," Victoria muttered under her breath, repeating the lie until it sounded convincing. "We were talking, and it all happened so fast." Emma's tiny hands gripped her doll's dress until her knuckles turned white. Though paralyzed by fear, her young mind absorbed every detail with haunting clarity. Victoria is bad, she thought, her heart pounding like a drum. Very bad. The wail of approaching sirens pierced the tension-filled air. Composing herself, Victoria smoothed her disheveled hair and straightened her stained dress. When paramedics burst through the doors, she rushed to meet them, tears streaming down her face. "In here! Please, my husband! He fell! It was horrible!" "Shh!" Her breath hitched as the full weight of what she had just done crashed over her. She descended the stairs slowly, her knees trembling with each step. Approaching his still form, she could hear his faint, uneven breathing. "Oh my God, what have I done?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by Robert's laboured moans and the distant ticking of a clock. Victoria stood there, her mind spinning in slow motion, grappling with the enormity of her actions. Fear and guilt swirled within her like a violent storm. "No one can know about this," she thought desperately. "I need to make it look like an accident." Her brain raced to concoct a plan to cover up her crime. Suddenly, an almost imperceptible sound, a faint creak, caught her attention. Her head snapped upward toward the upper hallway, her heart pounding once again. "Is someone there?" she called out, her voice quivering slightly. The silence that greeted her was more terrifying than any. Emma watched their movements through a small gap between the curtain and the wall. Her curious yet frightened eyes followed every action as they worked on Mr. Robert. The smell of antiseptic reached her nose, mingling with the sweet perfume that lingered throughout the mansion. The girl wanted to scream, to tell the truth, but something deep inside warned her of the danger of being noticed. Michael Walker, Emma's father, burst into the mansion upon hearing the commotion. His impeccably pressed driver's uniform contrasted sharply with his expression of genuine concern. "Mrs. Victoria, do you need anything? Can I help?" he asked, unaware that his own daughter was hidden upstairs, carrying a secret far too heavy for her age. Victoria quickly glanced up the stairs, a shiver running down her spine as she remembered the noise she had heard earlier. Her shrewd eyes scanned every visible corner of the upstairs hallway, searching for any sign of movement. For a fleeting moment, her gaze lingered. "Continue to live through us and everything he built," she consoled, her soft voice masking the triumph she felt inside. "It's finally over," she thought. "Now, no one can stop me from having everything I've always wanted." The overcast sky seemed to share the mourning that hung over the cemetery that morning. A crowd dressed in black gathered around Robert Harris's casket, while Ethan stood still, his gaze fixed on the photograph of his father, adorning the ceremony site. The raindrops began to fall, softly mingling with his silent tears. Victoria by his side held a black umbrella over both of them, perfectly portraying the role of an inconsolable widow. "He was such a good, generous man," she murmured to the attendees, her voice choked with a sadness she did not feel. Michael Walker was present with his daughter, fulfilling his duty as the family's driver. Even in such a solemn moment, the little girl did not let go of her father's hand, her big, frightened eyes alternating between the casket and Victoria's. "Continue to live through us and everything he built." She consoled, her soft voice masking the triumph she felt inside. "It's finally over," she thought. "Now no one can stop me from having everything I've always wanted." The overcast sky seemed to share the mourning that hung over the cemetery that morning. A crowd dressed in black gathered around Robert Harris's casket, while Ethan stood still, his gaze fixed on the photograph of his father, adorning the ceremony site. The raindrops began to fall softly, mingling with his silent tears. Victoria, by his side, held a black umbrella over both of them, perfectly portraying the role of an inconsolable widow. "He was such a good, generous man," she murmured to the attendees, her voice choked with a sadness she did not feel. Michael Walker was present with his daughter, fulfilling his duty as the family's driver. Even in such a solemn moment, the little girl did not let go of her father's hand, her big, frightened eyes alternating between the casket and Victoria's. The late afternoon sun dipped low over the nearly empty parking lot of the Harris business complex, casting elongated shadows between the parked cars. From her office window on the top floor, Victoria adjusted her sunglasses, her gaze fixed on the small figure of Emma playing alone near her father's car. The girl sat on the curb, her inseparable doll in her lap, drawing with coloured chalk on the asphalt, while waiting for Michael to finish his workday tasks. Finally, a perfect opportunity, Victoria thought, a calculating smile forming on her lips. The sharp click of her heels echoed through the deserted parking lot as she approached the girl. Each step was deliberate, measured, like a predator closing in on its prey. Emma hummed a children's song softly, distracted by her drawings. The cold wind rustled the leaves of nearby trees, creating dancing shadows that seemed almost alive. As if trying to warn the little one of the approaching danger, Victoria adjusted her posture, transforming. Ellie held it delicately between her fingers, the golden wrapper glinting faintly in the fading light. "See? Just a little taste," she coaxed, her voice smooth as silk, but laced with an undercurrent of something darker. "It's not poison, sweetheart. It's just chocolate." Emma's wide eyes darted from the candy to Victoria's face, her tiny chest rising and falling rapidly with each panicked breath. She wanted to scream, to run, to call for her father, but fear had rooted her feet to the ground. Her doll hung limply in her arms, its painted smile mocking her helplessness. Victoria leaned closer, her shadow looming over Emma like a storm cloud ready to burst. "Take it," she urged, her tone shifting ever so slightly. Still sweet, but now edged with impatience. "You'll feel better once you do. Trust me." The distant hum of voices grew louder somewhere behind them, muffled by the wind that whipped through the parking lot. For a fleeting second, Emma dared to hope someone would come, a passerby, but ... "Emma," she began, her voice sharpening despite her efforts to keep it gentle. "You don't want to make things difficult for your daddy, do you? If people find out he's been upset, well, it might cause problems for him. Is that what you want?" Emma's lower lip quivered, but she held her ground. Her father had always told her to trust her instincts, and right now, her instincts screamed that Victoria couldn't be trusted. No matter how many chocolates he offered, or how sweetly she spoke, Emma knew the truth. This woman meant harm. Just then, the sound of footsteps echoed across the parking lot. Both Emma and Victoria turned sharply toward the noise. Relief flooded Emma's face as she spotted her father striding toward them, his brow furrowed with concern. "Emma!" he called out, quickening his pace. "What are you doing out here alone?" Victoria straightened instantly, smoothing her dress and plastering on a dazzling smile. "Oh, Mr. Harper, perfect timing. Your daughter and I were just having..." The mingling scents of expensive perfume and chocolate filled the air as she leaned in, her voice hypnotic. "You see, Emma, special people like you and me, we need to look out for each other, keep important secrets, and in return, we can have whatever we want." She broke off a piece of the chocolate, holding it out enticingly. But treat glistened seductively in the fading light. Emma took a hesitant step forward, her gaze fixed on the candy as if in a trance. Victoria pressed her advantage, placing a seemingly gentle hand on the girl's shoulder. Beneath the facade of kindness, however, the touch carried an unspoken threat. "There now, it's not so hard to trust me, is it?" Victoria asked, her red nails digging lightly into Emma's shoulder. "How about you tell me what you wanted to say to your father at the cemetery?" Fear surged back into Emma's eyes with full force. She recoiled, her back hitting the cold wall again as a single tear rolled down her cheek. Victoria kept the chocolate X. The mingling scents of expensive perfume and chocolate filled the air as she leaned in, her voice hypnotic. "You see, Emma, special people like you and me, we need to look out for each other, keep important secrets, and in return, we can have whatever we want." She broke off a piece of the chocolate, holding it out enticingly. The treat glistened seductively in the fading light. Emma took a hesitant step forward, her gaze fixed on the candy as if in a trance. Victoria pressed her advantage, placing a seemingly gentle hand on the girl's shoulder. Beneath the facade of kindness, however, the touch carried an unspoken threat. "There now, it's not so hard to trust me, is it?" Victoria asked, her red nails digging lightly into Emma's shoulder. "How about you tell me what you wanted to say to your father at the cemetery?" Fear surged back into Emma's eyes with full force. She recoiled. Fear surged back into Emma's eyes with full force. She recoiled. Her back hitting the cold wall again as a single tear rolled down her cheek. Victoria kept the chocolate X. The sweet aroma of chocolate wafted through the chilly evening air, almost too tempting to resist. Emma's mouth watered just a little as she stared at the glistening treat in Victoria's hand. The woman leaned closer, her voice smooth and honeyed, like silk laced with poison. "A secret in exchange for all the sweets you want. It's a great deal, don't you think?" Victoria whispered, her lips curling into what might have passed for a warm smile if it weren't for the sharp glint in her eyes. The sound of approaching footsteps made her glance quickly over her shoulder, but it was only the wind weaving between the parked cars, scattering leaves and crumpled papers across the desolate parking lot. When she turned back to Emma, she noticed the girl had taken another small step forward, her wide eyes fixed on the chocolate bar. A triumphant smirk began to form on Victoria's face. "That's it, dear," she coaxed, her tone low and persuasive. "You see how easy it is? Now tell me, what did you see, dear? You can tell me everything. It will be our little secret." Her gaze locked onto the girl's face with predatory intensity. Emma swallowed hard, her hands trembling so violently that her doll nearly slipped from her grasp. The scent of chocolate mingled with Victoria's expensive perfume, creating a sickly, sweet combination that filled the space between them. The girl looked around one last time, searching for an escape route, but there was none. She was cornered, trapped between Victoria and the cold, unyielding wall of the parking lot. "I was playing in the hallway that night," Emma began, her childish voice laden with fear. Victoria leaned in closer, straining to catch every word that tumbled from the girl's trembling lips. The sound of her own heartbeat thundered in her ears as she waited for confirmation of her worst fears. Emma continued, the words spilling out faster now, as if she could no longer contain them. "I saw when you and Uncle Robert were fighting." The temperature in the parking lot seemed to drop several degrees as Emma nodded slowly, tears streaming freely down her face. The fear in her wide, innocent eyes was palpable, a stark contrast to the transformation unfolding on Victoria's face. The mask of kindness had fallen away completely, revealing the true nature of the woman before her, a cold, calculating figure that sent shivers down even an adult's spine. "I didn't want to see Aunt Victoria. I swear I didn't want to," Emma whispered between sobs, her voice trembling with a terror no child should ever know. The chocolate bar slipped from Victoria's fingers, hitting the ground with a dull thud that echoed ominously through the empty space. Her expression hardened into something far more menacing than anything Emma or anyone had seen before. "Well, dear Emma," Victoria said, her voice now sharp and devoid of its earlier sweetness. "It seems we'll need to have a very serious talk about keeping secrets, and believe me, it won't be." Victoria rose once again, walking over to her closet where she kept a private safe disguised behind a row of expensive shoes. Her fingers punched in the combination with practiced precision, revealing a considerable amount of cash, her personal emergency fund, kept secret even from Robert. Money solves any problem, even that of an inconvenient little witness, she thought, counting out some bills and placing them in a discreet envelope. Her phone vibrated again, this time with a message from Michael, informing her that Emma had told him about their encounter in the parking lot. Victoria felt her stomach churn, but maintained her composure. She replied with a casual message, explaining that she had simply wanted to be kind to the girl. However, her fingers gripped the phone unnecessarily tightly as she typed. "I need to act before she tells anyone else what she's already told. Time is running out," she muttered to herself, immediately deleting the conversation after sending the message. No mistakes this time, she thought, closing the balcony doors softly behind her. Returning to her favourite armchair, Victoria picked up her phone and began discreetly researching cases of missing children in the area. Her fingers moved across the screen with surgical precision, absorbing every detail. Statistics, patterns, high incident zones, all meticulously catalogued in her mind. It happens all the time. Children simply disappear, she murmured to herself. A sinister smile forming on her perfectly painted lips. The blue glow of the device illuminated her face in an eerie light, emphasizing the coldness in her eyes. A sound of approaching footsteps made Victoria quickly switch the screen to an innocuous home decor website. A maid passed by, casting a curious glance into the room through the half-open door. Maintaining a neutral expression, Victoria gave the staff member a slight nod before they continued on their way. As soon as the footsteps faded, she resumed her dark research. Her perfectly manicured nails tapped rhythmically against the polished surface of her vanity as she stared at her reflection. The elegant woman staring back at her was now consumed by a dangerous determination. "I can't let a 6-year-old destroy everything I've built," Victoria muttered, adjusting an errant strand of hair with calculated precision. The room, still filled with remnants of Robert's belongings, felt suffocating, heavy with memories she'd rather forget. She flung open the balcony doors, letting the cool evening breeze sweep in, carrying whispers of the distant city below. Her thoughts returned to Emma, the fear in her wide eyes, her trembling confession. Yes, children were fragile, easily intimidated into silence, but they were also unpredictable, reckless even. One careless moment, one slip of the tongue, and Emma could ruin everything. Soon little Emma will be nothing but a distant memory. The clock struck midnight, its chimes echoing through the silent mansion. Victoria put away her planning materials, her movements calm yet deliberate. The pieces were falling into place, and she would leave nothing to chance. Ask, explain. The air seemed to cool several degrees as Emma nodded slowly, tears streaming freely down her cheeks. The fear in her wide eyes was almost tangible, a living thing that hung heavy between them. She watched, frozen, as Victoria's face transformed before her, like watching a mask peel away to reveal something far darker beneath. The kindness she had worn so convincingly moments ago was gone, replaced by a coldness that made Emma's small frame tremble even more. "I didn't want to see Aunt Victoria. I swear I didn't," the girl whispered through choked sobs, her voice trembling under the weight of a terror no child should ever know. Her words were barely audible, but they carried Then she returned to her grim task, her fingers gripping the phone tightly enough to leave crescent-shaped marks on its case. "I need to make it look random," she thought aloud. "Something untraceable. Someone disposable." As the night wore on, Victoria refined her plan. Every detail mattered. Every variable had to be considered. She retrieved a notepad from her drawer and began jotting down coded notes using a cipher only she understood. The scratch of the pen against paper blended with her steady breathing as she mapped out each step of her scheme. No one connected to the company or the family, she decided, underlining key phrases in her notebook. It has to be someone outside, someone who won't raise suspicion. Rising from her chair, she walked over to her closet, where a private safe was hidden behind a row of expensive shoes. With practiced precision, she entered the combination, revealing stacks of cash, her personal emergency fund kept secret even from Robert. Money solves. For bed, her face betraying no sign of the weight of the decisions she had just made. As she lay in her luxurious bed, her thoughts remained active, refining every aspect of her plan. Sweets may not have been enough to buy your silence, Emma, but there are other ways to make a child disappear, was her last thought before closing her eyes, a cruel smile playing on her lips. Faith and Harris sat in the office that had belonged to his father, his fingers idly tracing the polished surface of the old solid wood desk. The morning sunlight streamed through the wide windows, illuminating the stack of documents sprawled out before him. Financial reports, bank statements, and most importantly, the private investigator's report his father had hired to keep tabs on Victoria. His brows furrowed as he studied every detail, every suspicious transaction, every documented encounter. Something doesn't add up in this accident story, he muttered to himself, circling specific dates with his pen. The young businessman stood up and, far from the glittering ballrooms and prying eyes of high society, Victoria parked her car a block away. She slipped out of her designer heels, exchanged them for discreet flats, and donned sunglasses despite the late afternoon light. Her heart pounded as she walked toward the dingy cafe, an envelope tucked securely inside a plain paper sack. "Stay calm, stay in control," she repeated like a mantra under her breath. Inside the cafe, the air hung heavy with the scent of grease and burnt coffee. Victoria chose a shadowy corner table where she could blend into the dimness. She ordered a coffee she had no intention of drinking and waited, her fingers drumming nervously on the stained tabletop. The man arrived punctually, dressed in nondescript clothes that made him look like any other worker heading home after a long day. Without preamble, he sat down across from her, his cold eyes assessing her with professional precision. "Do you have the package?" he asked bluntly. Victoria slid the N. "But some witnesses need to be permanently silenced." The next morning, the sun had barely risen when Emma settled onto the curb in the company parking lot, just as she did every day. Her inseparable doll rested in her lap as she absent-mindedly drew with chalk on the asphalt. Michael had instructed her to wait there while he handled some important paperwork upstairs. The chilly morning breeze ruffled her dress as she hummed softly, trying to shake off the lingering fear from her encounter with Victoria. "Aunt Victoria is bad, very bad," she whispered to her doll, unaware of the dark van slowly approaching. The kidnapper had been watching Emma for several minutes, following Victoria's meticulous instructions to the letter. His movements were calculated and precise as he parked strategically away from the security cameras, adjusting his leather gloves to ensure no fingerprints were left behind. He prepared himself, Emma's childish instincts kicked in as she noticed the stranger's presence. Satisfied, he pocketed the envelope and leaned forward, his voice low, almost swallowed by the hum of the cafe. "Now, tell me exactly what needs to be done with the girl," he demanded, his tone devoid of emotion, as though discussing logistics for a business deal rather than the fate of a child. Victoria forced herself to focus, detailing Emma's routine, the times when the girl was most vulnerable, the places she frequented while waiting for her father. The man listened intently, nodding occasionally as he absorbed the information. "There should be no connection to you," he assured her, his voice detached and clinical. "This will look like any other kidnapping." A chill ran down Victoria's spine as he outlined how he would make Emma disappear. Her perfectly manicured nails dug crescent-shaped marks into her palms as she fought to maintain her composure. The untouched coffee sat cooling in front of her, a silent witness to the sinister exchange unfolding. "When?" Victoria asked, her voice. "Quiet now, little one. I won't hurt you if you cooperate," the kidnapper lied, his voice chillingly devoid of emotion. The van sped away, taking Emma far from everything she knew and loved. In the back seat, the girl sobbed silently, her wide eyes fixed on her abandoned doll, which grew smaller and smaller as the vehicle drove further into the unknown. The man glanced periodically in the rearview mirror, ensuring they weren't being followed. Victoria had paid well for this to look like a common kidnapping, the kind that happened every day in big cities. But beneath the surface of normalcy lay a meticulously planned operation, designed to erase Emma from existence without leaving a trace. Ask, explain. He thought coldly, turning onto another side street. The city streets blurred past as Emma was taken further and further away from the safe place she knew. Her tiny fingers clung tightly to the fabric of the seat, leaving nail marks on the synthetic material. A fear in her heart was so great that she could barely breathe, each SOB caught in her throat, as if afraid to make any noise. The kidnapper continued driving methodically, following a pre-planned route that would take them to the outskirts of the city. Soon it will be time to leave her at her final destination, he muttered to himself, checking the address Victoria had specified. The van finally stopped in an abandoned area of the city, far from any movement or witnesses. The man got out of the vehicle, opening the rear door with a rough motion. Emma shrank back even further. The doll in his arms felt impossibly heavy, as though it carried the weight of all Michael's guilt and fear. His voice trembled, words choking on sobs as he tried to explain what had happened. "My Emma, she was here. I had to take care of some papers. It was supposed to be quick, and now she's gone." His voice broke on the last word, the crushing realization threatening to consume him. Ethan placed a firm hand on Michael's shoulder, his mind racing. The suspicions about his father's death, Emma's frightened behavior, her sudden disappearance, it all seemed to fit into a dark, twisted puzzle. He glanced around, noticing the strategically positioned security cameras. "We'll check the camera footage immediately," Ethan declared, trying to steady the chaos swirling in Michael's eyes. If someone took Emma, it must have been recorded. But the internal circuit security guard brought devastating news. The cameras covering that specific area of the parking lot had mysteriously stopped. Ethan coordinated everything with surprising efficiency, given the urgency of the situation. Michael observed it all through a haze of tears, occasionally offering choked details about places Emma knew and frequented. "She's so small, so innocent. Why would someone do this to a child?" he asked, his voice breaking under the weight of his sorrow. Ethan paused in his activities, his eyes meeting Michael's with intense focus. He walked to the window, ensuring Victoria couldn't overhear his next words. "Michael, I need you to tell me everything Emma had been saying these past few days. Every detail could be important, especially about the night of my father's." His voice faltered momentarily. "The night of the accident." Michael clutched the doll tighter to his chest, his eyes widening with sudden understanding. Emma's words, her fears, her nightmares, it all began to make a terrible kind of sense. Victoria, still observing from the doorway, noticed the shift in atmosphere and took a step off. The driver's face drained of colour with every word Michael spoke. Decades of secrets and fears finally spilled over, his hands trembling as he clutched Emma's doll, the last tangible connection to his missing daughter. "Mr. Ethan," Michael began, his voice barely above a terrified whisper. "Emma saw something that night. Something that tormented her. Something about your stepmother." Before either man could say more, the sharp click of heels in the hallway silenced them. Victoria swept past the doorway again, her shrewd eyes scanning the room with barely concealed curiosity. Ethan quickly turned back to the maps spread across the table, but his mind raced feverishly. "No matter who is behind this," he vowed silently, "no matter the cost or how long it takes, I will find Emma and uncover the truth about my father's death." The sun dipped below the horizon, casting elongated shadows across the office as search teams mobilized throughout the city. Michael remained standing, clutching his dowel. "Aunt Victoria, she's bad." Her words trailed off as her eyelids fluttered shut, succumbing to exhaustion. Ethan watched through the rearview mirror as he sped toward the hospital, his mind processing every syllable Emma had uttered. Her condition spoke volumes. It wasn't a simple kidnapping. This was a calculated attempt to silence an innocent witness. The rain continued its relentless assault, as if the sky itself mourned the ordeal the little girl had endured. "She needs immediate medical attention," Ethan thought grimly, pressing harder on the accelerator. In the back seat, Michael rocked Emma gently, trying to warm her with his own body as he murmured soothing words. But her fever seemed to climb higher with each passing minute, her breathing growing increasingly laboured. The fear that had gripped Michael's heart these past days transformed into a new kind of terror. The fear of finding his daughter, only to lose her again. "Hang in there, my love," he repeated like a mantra, praying. The doctors moved with urgency, their voices sharp as they dictated orders. Nurses scrambled to prepare emergency medications, while Michael tried to follow the gurney carrying his daughter, Emma. A nurse gently restrained him, her touch firm but not unkind. "We need some information about her," she said softly, handing him a clipboard. His hands trembled as he filled out the forms, each word a struggle against the tears blurring his vision. Ethan stood by his side, a silent but steady presence, watching the frantic activity of healthcare professionals through the glass doors of the emergency room. "She'll make it, Michael," Ethan murmured, trying to reassure the distraught father. "She's stronger than we imagined." But even as he spoke, his own voice betrayed the weight of his concern. Minutes dragged like hours. Every time a doctor or nurse passed, Michael rose hopefully, only to sink back into his chair when he realized they weren't there for him. The sound of hurried footsteps and... Michael leaned anxiously over the bed, his heart racing with renewed hope. "Emma, can you hear me, sweetheart?" he asked softly, brushing damp strands of hair from her forehead. Emma's eyes finally opened, taking a few seconds to focus on her father's face. The initial fear in her gaze melted into recognition and relief. Tears streamed down her pale cheeks as she tried to speak, her sore throat making it difficult to form words. Michael quickly grabbed a cup of water, helping her take small sips. "Aunt Victoria," she began weakly, but Michael gently stopped her, worried that speaking might worsen her condition. Ethan, observing from the doorway, felt his body tense at the mention of Victoria's name. Emma seemed desperate to say more, her wide eyes darting nervously around the room, as if fearing someone might be hiding in the shadows. Ethan made a discreet signal to Michael, indicating they needed to tread carefully. Whatever Emma wanted to reveal, they couldn't risk agitating her fur. The weight of the diagnosis seemed to age him instantly. Leaning against the hospital wall, his legs threatened to give way beneath him. Ethan placed a steadying hand on his shoulder, offering silent strength. But inside, his thoughts churned darkly. This wasn't just the aftermath of a random kidnapping. It was calculated cruelty. Whoever abandoned such a small child in such a remote area during a storm knew exactly what they were doing. Hours passed in torturous anticipation. Nurses came and went, carrying equipment and administering treatments. Through the small window in the door, Michael could see Emma connected to multiple machines, her tiny body fighting against fever and infection. She looked so fragile, so impossibly small amidst the tangle of wires and tubes. "How can anyone be so cruel to an innocent child?" Michael whispered, his voice breaking under the weight of emotion. Night crept forward, the rhythmic beeping of the monitors providing a grim soundtrack to their vigil. To use this dinner to consolidate her position as the true Heiss of the Harris Empire, taking advantage of Ethan's temporary absence, who was still at the hospital with that insignificant driver and his irritating daughter. Victoria's cell phone vibrated discreetly in her designer purse, making her heart accelerate slightly. She elegantly stepped away from the guests, walking to the entrance hall to check the message. Her perfectly manicured nails almost broke the phone screen when she read the content. "The girl was found alive. She's at the hospital with her father and Ethan Harris." The crystal glass in her other hand trembled dangerously, threatening to spill its contents onto the Persian carpet. "Damned girl! How did she survive?" she thought furiously, her fingers gripping the phone with unnecessary force. The sound of more guests arriving forced Victoria to recompose her perfect hostess mask. She put away the phone, adjusted her smile, and returned to the living room. Although inside, her blood boiled. What? To use this dinner to consolidate her position as the true Heiss of the Harris Empire, taking advantage of Ethan's temporary absence, who was still at the hospital with that insignificant driver and his irritating daughter. Victoria's cell phone vibrated discreetly in her designer purse, making her heart accelerate slightly. She elegantly stepped away from the guests, walking to the entrance hall to check the message. Her perfectly manicured nails almost broke the phone screen when she read the content. "The girl was found alive. She's at the hospital with her father and Ethan Harris." The crystal glass in her other hand trembled dangerously, threatening to spill its contents onto the Persian carpet. "Damned girl! How did she survive?" she thought furiously, her fingers gripping the phone with unnecessary force. The sound of more guests arriving forced Victoria to recompose her perfect hostess mask. She put away the phone, adjusted her smile, and returned to the living room. Although inside, her blood boiled. Her little hands clenched into fists, trembling with a mix of fear and determination. "I didn't do anything wrong," Emma thought fiercely, her heart pounding like a drum in her tiny chest. The guests sat frozen in their seats, unwilling participants in the drama unfolding before them. The silence was so thick, it seemed to press against everyone's lungs, broken only by the faint tinkle of crystal when Victoria slammed her hand down on the table. "Michael, as you can see, the silence was so thick, it seemed to press against everyone's lungs, broken only by the faint tinkle of crystal. The silence was so thick, it seemed to press against everyone's lungs, broken only by the faint tinkle of crystal." "Michael! Emma, I'm very sorry for any disruption. I can't address you any further. I am very sorry for any disruption. I want to be promptly expedited. You have 5 minutes to leave this house, or I'll call security," Victoria hissed, her voice dripping with an authority that felt borrowed, unnatural. But as she spoke, something inside Emma snapped. All the fear, all the anguish of watching her father humiliated over the past few days, coalesced into a courage that only a child could summon, a raw, unfiltered bravery born from love. With her doll clutched tightly to her chest like a shield, Emma stepped forward. A cruel smile curled her lips as she grabbed her wine glass and downed its contents in one gulp. "Your father was a fool, Ethan. He discovered my plans and threatened to leave me with nothing. I couldn't allow that." Her confession hung in the air like poison, each word confirming Ethan's worst fears. His eyes filled with tears of anger as he watched the woman who had destroyed his family try and fail to maintain her haughty demeanor. "And then you tried to kill an innocent child to cover up your crime," Ethan accused, his voice shaking with barely contained fury. Victoria shrugged, an eerily elegant gesture that felt grotesquely out of place. "She was a threat that needed to be eliminated," she replied coldly. Ethan withdrew his cell phone, his movements precise and calculated. With deft fingers, he accessed files he had painstakingly gathered and projected them onto the large dining room screen. Bank statements, suspicious transfers, attempted account breaches, all appeared one by one. A cruel smile curled her lips as she grabbed her wine glass and downed its contents in one gulp. "Your father was a fool, Ethan. He discovered my plans and threatened to leave me with nothing. I couldn't allow that." Her confession hung in the air like poison, each word confirming Ethan's worst fears. His eyes filled with tears of anger as he watched the woman who had destroyed his family try and fail to maintain her haughty demeanor. "And then you tried to kill an innocent child to cover up your crime," Ethan accused, his voice shaking with barely contained fury. Victoria shrugged, an eerily elegant gesture that felt grotesquely out of place. "She was a threat that needed to be eliminated," she replied coldly. Ethan withdrew his cell phone, his movements precise and calculated. With deft fingers, he accessed files he had painstakingly gathered and projected them onto the large dining room screen. Bank statements, suspicious transfers, attempted account breaches, all appeared one by one. "And Emma," Ethan began, his voice heavy with sincerity and gratitude, "are the true heroes of this story." The envelope Ethan handed Michael contained far more than a simple rehire letter. It was an invitation to a new chapter in life. A promotion to Director of Operations for the Harris Companies awaited him. Michael's hands trembled as he took the documents, his eyes widening at the terms outlined within. The salary proposed was beyond anything he had ever dared to imagine, and the responsibilities entrusted to him spoke of a faith that touched him deeply. "Mr. Ethan," Michael started, his voice thick with emotion, "I don't know if I'm ready." Ethan gently interrupted, placing a firm but reassuring hand on Michael's shoulder. "Your years of loyalty and honesty are exactly what this company needs after everything it's been through." The office, once a fortress of power and intimidation under Victoria's reign, now felt warmer, almost welcoming, under Ethan's leadership. "You know." En una revelación profunda, el primer secreto de Medjugorje ha sido anunciado hoy, trayendo consigo un mensaje de urgencia para toda la humanidad. El año 2024 marcará el inicio de eventos significativos, siendo el primero de ellos un momento crucial que cambiará el curso de la historia. Esta revelación ha sido hecha pública a través de Mirjana Dragicevic Soldo, una de las 6 videntes que han estado recibiendo apariciones de la Virgen María. La Reina de la Paz, en el pequeño pueblo bosnio de Medjugorje desde 1981. Mirjana ha sido confiada con 10 secretos, cada uno de los cuales tiene el potencial de decidir el destino del mundo. El primer secreto, cuyo desenlace se espera para 2024, es una clara señal del cambio dramático y espiritual que está por venir. La Virgen María ha llamado repetidamente a un periodo de oración, reflexión y conversión, subrayando que el mundo se encuentra en una encrucijada donde la intervención divina es esencial para evitar mayores calamidades. Alguno was as bright as before. Michael grew each day in his new position, his natural dedication and honesty making him a respected and admired leader. The Harris Mansion, once a place of fear and dark secrets, was now just another workplace with no power over their lives. The true reward, however, was not in material possessions or recovered social status, but in the peace they finally found. The Walkers' new home became a haven of joy and tranquility, with the sound of Emma's laughter echoing through the halls like a melody that healed old wounds. The garden, carefully planned, with colourful flowers and a small fountain, became the girl's favourite place to play with her newly restored doll. "Daddy, look what Rosa can do now!" Emma shouted happily, making her doll dance among the daisies. Michael, sitting on the porch with a cup of coffee in his hands, smiled as he watched his daughter return to simply being a child. "She dances as well as you, my princess," he replied, his heart overflowing with gratitude for the new. The walls of her once lavish mansion echoed with the hollow sounds of dismantling. Paintings were pried from their gilded frames, credit cards snipped into useless shards, and bank accounts frozen, emptied to pay for the damages decreed by the court. The Harris companies had left no stone unturned. Every penny she'd tried to embezzle was recovered, with interest. Victoria watched as her empire unraveled before her eyes. Her luxury cars were towed away, one by one, like trophies stripped from a fallen conqueror. Designer handbags were packed into boxes, perfumes inventoried like relics of a life that now seemed foreign, even to her. Each item removed felt like a dagger piercing what remained of her pride. Years spent building this opulent existence, years of calculated schemes, relentless ambition, and cold-hearted decisions, all crumbled because of a child. Bitterness clawed at her chest as she dug her ragged nails into her palms. How could someone so small dismantle something so vast? Watching her distorted reflection in the bus windows, she barely recognized the woman staring back. Deep lines etched her face, telling stories of bitterness and belated regret. 30 years, she thought bitterly, scrubbing at particularly stubborn stains. 30 long years paying for a few minutes of rage. Behavior reports documented her every move inside the prison. Guards kept vigilant watch, aware of her manipulative tendencies and the risks she posed. Victoria had lost more than freedom and material possessions. She had lost dignity, control, and power over others. Attempts to manipulate the system were swiftly discovered and punished, resulting in tighter restrictions and increased surveillance. "You're no longer in control here, Mrs. Harris," the warden often reminded her, his tone dripping with irony as he emphasized her former title. Time marched relentlessly forward, transforming the once mighty queen of the Harris Empire into just another inmate serving her sentence. Yell. In the heart of a sprawling estate, where shadows danced across marble floors and whispers seemed to echo endlessly, Victoria stood frozen at the precipice of her own undoing. She had always believed herself cunning, a master manipulator who could bend fate to her will. But now, staring down at Robert's crumpled form, sprawled lifelessly at the foot of the grand staircase, she felt as though the universe had finally caught up with her. It all began earlier that day, when Robert's voice cut through the air like steel, low but sharp with resolve. "When my lawyers are done with you," he'd said, his words dripping venom, "there won't be anything left. You'll go back to where you came from, Victoria. No money, no status, nothing." The declaration hit her like a slap, shattering the illusion of control she'd so carefully cultivated. Her dreams of wealth and power, carefully constructed over years of calculated moves, began slipping through her fingers like grains of sand in an hourglass. Panic,